Part 2. Gone to Dakota. Sing me a song with a chivalrous theming, courage and love in a weird saddening strain, bold in its tenor but soft in its dreaming, soft in its dreaming of sorrow and pain. Chapter 9. Working on the Old C7. On my way to Morristown, South Dakota, I saw many new and strange scenes. I had to unload, water, and feed the steers at the Fort Worth pens, reload them in freshly sanded cars, and at Wichita, Kansas, I had to unload, water, and feed. And again at Kansas City, Missouri, I attended them. After leaving the Kansas City area, the railroad track followed the Missouri River bend for many miles, giving one a fine view of the valley and the river with its many motorboats going up and down, with fishermen and pleasure seekers on board. We went in sight of Omaha, Nebraska, and on the Sioux City to Iowa, where I again unloaded, watered, and fed the steers. By then they were beginning to get very lank and weak. Some were going blind for want of water and feed, being too wild to drink and getting only 3 bales of hay to the car for 45 head of steers as feed. I unloaded at Sioux City about 7 in the morning and loaded up about 3:30 that evening. I saw to it that the steers got the 3 bales of hay to the car and had plenty of water. Sioux City was a lovely place located in the most fertile country that I have ever seen. While there, I visited the Morris and Company packing plant and learned the value of many parts of a cow that was thrown away with the butcher outside of a packing house. There isn't anything lost but the squeal of a hog and the bawl of a calf there. We pulled out of that city at about 4 one evening and about 1 the next day, as the train moved to the rate of 30 miles an hour across the level plains of the southern part of Minnesota, near the small town of Worthington. I perched myself on top of the caboose with my back to the outlook, taking the scenery of the whole new world. I was a lonely cowboy for sure. I was leaving behind my many friends and my family. Right then I had no intention of ever going back to Texas. With those thoughts in my mind, and seeing no bright prospects for my future, only to follow the range country all my days, I was suddenly jarred back to reality when the caboose began to buck and lung, jump and swing to and fro. I had ridden many miles in my day on top of a bucking bronc, and a few cabooses, but none of them had ever behaved that way. I rolled over the caboose, catching anything that I could grab to try to keep on top. I certainly didn't care to take a drop to the ground or be left on that lonesome prairie. As soon as the critter quit cutting capers, I could look ahead, and I saw the cause of all the jolting. 17 stock cars were lying with bottoms up or on their sides, and partly standing on the end, or leaning partly against other cars. Cattle were leaving them in every direction. Some in good shape, some hopping off on broken legs, some trying to drag themselves away from the cars as best they could. Many were writhing in agony and death. Beyond the dilapidated stock cars lay a big freight engine in a cloud of steam and dust. I got quickly to my feet and bareheaded, for I'd lost my top piece. I quickly started for the engine at no slow pace, and behind me came the conductor and the back brakeman. Though the conductor was badly bruised up, he could stand. I reached the engine service car, lengths ahead of the other 2 men. When the brave engineer saw me, he said, "Lad, give me your hand. I'm stuck." I was sickened by the sight. The man stretched out his hand towards me. I waded through water and steam and took the outstretched hand. I gave it a hard pull. To my utter dismay, the skin slipped off like a boiled potato peeling. I had to step back to keep from being scalded myself. A steam pipe had broken, and the water was pouring into the firebox and onto the engine, making a cloud of heavy steam. The head brakeman and the fireman were crushed and mangled beneath the coal feeder. The engineer had his left leg broken, and the throttle level was stuck through his thigh that held him fast. I'd never seen a poor fellow die a more miserable death than he did. His flesh was cooked by scalding water and steam. As soon as we had time to collect our scattered thoughts, the conductor started in a trot for the nearest station to report our accident. The brakeman and I went to work trying to free the cattle that were being crowded and trampled to death. We couldn't help the three dead men because of the intense heat causing them to be boiling in water and steam. It was pitiful to see the dead and crippled cattle, too. Some had pieces of timber from the cars sticking clear through their bodies, while others had broken legs, ribs, and horns. Some were unhurt. I have never seen such a collection of destruction. I have thought many times in my life about that tragedy. The conductor soon came back from a station bringing the section hands with him. People were now beginning to come from all directions to the scene of death. Then the work train and the wrecking crew came, and soon swung the massive hoisting cranes and lifting into place, lifting the engine from where it lay and the lifeless cooked body of the engineer. He was tenderly lifted from where he lay and placed on the ground. The broken and mangled bodies of the firemen and the head brakeman were taken up and placed beside him. Tears came to my eyes, and many of the onlookers wept aloud. 2 days after the wreck, the track was rebuilt and was clear, ready for the train to pass over. This wreck detained me on the way about 4 extra hours. That cost the St. Paul, Milwaukee, and Chicago Railroad many dollars. The spreading of the rails was supposedly the cause of the wreck, as it was on a curved grade. Thus I resumed my journey, leaving some 160 head of cattle either crippled or dead. The train slowly wound its way around the valley and climbed the ridge beyond. I watched the setting of the glorious sun as it sank behind the horizon in the west, leaving its golden light on the white clouds scattered about. It was the most beautiful sunset I can remember. We neared the mouth of the Grand River, which runs west through South Dakota and on into Wyoming. The Missouri was on a rampage caused by the melting snow and spring rains. Farther up the mountains, the hills and valleys shone bright and clear in the May sunshine as the train sped on up westward and wound its way up along the side of the mountain stream, with its sparkling clear water dashing into foam among the rocks stung red, and sharp curved bank clothed in lovely green with golden willow and ash with box elder strung along its banks, and the occasional log cabin built near its banks. Such beauty helped me forget the awful nightmare of the train wreck. I resolved to someday own my own home by a beautiful mountain stream, and settle down with a wife and have a family. Mostly these thoughts were short in duration. After crossing the Missouri River, we were upon the noted Sioux Indian Reservation, which was to be my future home as long as I worked for Morris and Company, and the headquarters ranch was located near the dividing line between North and South Dakota, about 82 miles west of Monbridge, and 80 miles from what was known as the Four Corners, where the Dakotas and Wyoming and Montana all corner. When I reached my destination, Morristown, a bunch of men came from the old C7 house, which was a quarter of a mile from the stock pens. I asked for Mr. Charlie Hardy. A large, dark-complexioned fellow stepped towards me. I introduced myself and gave him the letter from Mr. Pence. I asked him if he had heard about the wreck, and I found that even in 1908, bad news had a way of traveling fast. He had gotten the report from the depot agent, but he asked me many questions about the cattle that had been left behind. He wanted to know if I had noticed Mr. Gardner in Chicago about the wreck. I told him I had, and that the crippled cattle that had left had been turned over to the railroad, and they would ship the least injured ones to us in a few days. I was invited to the ranch house instead of the wagon where the other men were bedded down. They had a tent to cook in, which was luxury that I had never seen in a cow ranch. I was quite used to sleeping under the stars, using my slicker for a bed. After I changed clothes, I met Mrs. Goldie Hardy, and I had not expected to find a white woman there in the heart of the Sioux Indian Reservation. In Morristown, there was only a section house, and the depot combined when I got there. The little town was named for Nels Morris, a ranch proprietor. Charlie Hardy was originally from Texas. He homesteaded in and around Devil's Tower, 10 miles from Hewlett, Wyoming, around 1900. Before he went to work on the superintendent of the vast C7 spread, He and Goldie lived in Chicago, where he had stock and inspector in North and South Dakota, Montana, and Wyoming. Mrs. Hardy's folk came from an ox team from Hewlett, Wyoming, around 1883, when Deadwood, South Dakota, was in its earliest boomtown days. Deadwood was about 50 miles from Hewlett. Mr. and Mrs. Hardy were married in December of 1898. 3 o'clock the next morning after my arrival, I heard the train coming into the depot bringing the rest of our cattle from El Paso. I got up and had my clothes on before the train whistled at the station. As soon as I saw it on the switch that stuck pins, I went to the other end of the house to wake the other hands. By daybreak, we had 1,800 head of cattle unloaded, and the train was leaving just as Mr. Hardy got up. We were all in the branding pens when he rode in. He watched for some time and asked me to go with him for a while. He wanted to know why I didn't wake him when the train came in. I told him we could get through the work, and that I had counted the cattle as we turned them into the big pen from the run to the loading pens. I counted every carload separately and set each carload down and was counting every draining pen full as they were turned out. He seemed satisfied with that. He didn't know that I could count. He told me to keep count of all that left the draining pens, and he would help hold them up to keep up them mixing with the other cattle on the range, as he wanted to put them in separate pasture to themselves. I climbed down from the fence and took my place at the squeeze with the branding iron. Every animal was branded and dipped by 2 that evening. My counts all tallied. When Mr. Hardy rode up again, he asked me about the count. I told him there was only 1,837 head of cattle in that load. He said, "Yeah, you're right. We are 3 short." "Yes, sir. I know there should have been 40 head in each car. One car had only 38, and another one had 39. I'll make out a report showing that the railroad company." "I believe you've shipped cattle before." He smiled at me and told me I'd done a good job. Next, we took the cattle to the dirty lodge pasture, which was 6 miles from the ranch. We had the cattle strung out for about a mile or more when we reached the gate. I had opened the gate with the help of the other men, and I had driven the lead cattle a mile into the pasture. I stopped as the tail end of the cattle was nearing the gate. I sat upon my horse, watching the hungry cattle scatter out over the green pasture, greedily eating the fresh grass, and they were allowed to roam at will. I was about to turn my horse homeward and rejoin the other cowboys when the lead cattle attracted my attention to something they had found. I watched them for a few moments and then rode forward to see what was causing the disturbance. When I rode near enough, I saw it was a white man lying on his back. He was fully dressed except his cap, which lay some feet away. I dismounted and walked up to him. I took a good look and then mounted and galloped away into a nearby hill and waved for the other boys to come. They came, but only one seemed to take any interest in the dead man. The others just rode on off. On looking through the papers I had taken from one of his pockets, I found a razor and a silver dollar. I found a notebook with F.T. Kelly written on the first page. I also found a letter of recommendation written by a man in Moorbridge, and it read, "Moorbridge, South Dakota, February 14th, 1908. I know this man to be all okay. Take him as far as you can. Signed, J.Q. Hughes." A nice handkerchief wore the initials F.T. in the corner, which had been worked by some woman's hand. A pocket looking glass lay between his feet. He was lying between 2 wagon ruts, and from all appearances, he had been jerked out of the back of the wagon by his feet. There was a bullet hole through his head near the temple, and it had come out near the right eye. I soon mounted and headed for the ranch. I did not try to move the man because I had heard it was unlawful to move a dead man off the reservation until after he had been buried for 6 months. I also heard that any white man who wished to cross the Indian reservation in any way except by train must first get a permit issued by the Indian agent. Otherwise, he would be subject to arrest and fine for trespassing upon the Indian reservation, which was patrolled by an Indian police. Mr. Hardy notified the officials at Fort Yates to come and hold an inquest. It seemed awful to me to leave him out there exposed to the elements until the officials had come. The writer of the letter was found. In about 12 days, 2 of the doctors in the reservation came. Mr. Hardy, the doctors, and 6 of us boys went to hold an inquest and to bury the poor man. We had to render a verdict of death for unknown reasons. No one ever found out who he was. He was about 6 feet tall, auburn hair, sandy beard, fair complexion, and he had false teeth. He was well dressed, a nice looking man. He had two spades to dig his grave. The soil was only 16 inches deep near where he lay. We struck a hard pan and almost as hard as rock, so we laid him to rest in a very shallow grave with a saddle blanket. No marker was made, thus he was buried, true cowboy style. The same year, the bodies of a woman and a girl about 2 years old were found by one of the cowboys. The two bodies were found in a clump of ash timber not very far from the old stage road and went to Fort Yates from Spearfish. Byrd Rose, who was in charge of the old L7 before it became the C7, said a white man, a woman, and a little child had stopped by the LV ranch 2 years before. They had left there saying they were going to Spearfish, a distance of about 128 miles. He thought it was likely the bodies had been found were those of the woman and child. The woman had the child clasped in her arms. No one could give any idea as to what became of the man and the wagon and the team. Many strange happenings in that country which no one could explain. Another incident happened while I was at the C7 one day in the company of George Adams, the line rider who stayed at the ranch. We saw a man coming toward the house. We were ready to leave, but we waited to see who it was and what he wanted. He came up talking to himself. He asked the way to Lemon. We told him that and rode off in the opposite direction. He was a white man and looked to be about 35 years old. He had long black hair that hung down his back most to his hips. He saw no arms of any kind on him. I only saw a big knife and a six-shooter. He had a canteen swung over a fork and a saddle nut. He had no bedding that I could tell. The next morning I saw the mare he had been riding and the colt that it was following. The mare was hobbled, and they were about 2 miles down the river from the ranch. I looked about for a while for the man, but could find no trace. I felt sure he was hiding from the law, but it was evident the man had been out of his head. Many times I wished that I had followed him and had tried to help, but lots of men in that country would not let a stranger come near them. When they thought that they were close enough, they would change course. If you followed, they would warn you with a bullet. The next day after finding the dead man was spent gathering horses, and the real work began. The C7 had shipped 125 head of young horses out here the summer before, and had tried to break part of them. There were about 20 men at the ranch, and all but 4 were natives of that part of the country, and of the Swede nationality. There was one big red-faced fellow weighing about 300 pounds, strong, and could work like a team of oxen. I got my fill of roping horses while there. We got the horses all together, and each of us was given 2 gentle horses and 5 head of broncs, and it was either ride or walk, as we chose. I had a PX Sorrel cut out for me. He had won the reputation among Swedes the fall before, and they were all eager to see me pack him. I felt the Sorrel was my last horse to ride. When it came time, it took me and a big Swede to pack him. The Swede eared him down while I put my pack on him. I had taken him out on the corral to saddle him since the corral was made of wire, and I didn't care to ride into it when my saddle was cinched good and tight. I mounted and told Big Willie to let him go. He turned loose its ear and threw his hat under him, and into the air it went, little done leveling the ground. But I conquered that bronc before I brought him back from a ride out of the country. That night, after we had all topped off our mounts, several of the Swedes had skinned and bruised heads and bodies. The next days then were spent branding cattle that came in nearly every day for W.N. Pence, was sending them as fast as he could bargain for them. Since Mr. Hardy was fresh from the stockyards in Chicago, he was almost as much a stranger to the place as I was. It was on my 7th day at the ranch that he sent word that he wanted to show me over the ranch. The day was foggy and cloudy, which caused the mosquitoes to be swarming something fierce. We had to wear mosquito bars over our faces and necks to keep them from eating us alive. We wore gaunted gloves and cloaks enough that they couldn't get to our bodies. Those mosquitoes were terrible. Usually they only stay 2 or 3 weeks, and this country was lovely again. Mr. Hardy and I spent 3 days riding while he showed me all he wanted me to do. Soon we became lost in the fog. I had to use my compass to see what course we were traveling. I knew if we had not changed our course, the wind had changed its course. We were all at that time going south, the wrong direction. Mr. Hardy told me he wanted to go north if we could keep up to it, and we would be a long way from where he wanted to go. "We'll go to the top of yonder hill and take a new start," he said. I did not answer, but kept pace with him best I could. We topped the hill, and after looking in every direction, Mr. Hardy struck his spurs into the horse's side and galloped away with me right behind him. After a mile or more had been covered, I drew rein beside him and handed him my compass. "Why do you want me to carry this thing?" he asked. "I thought you could keep your course better. You might use it to show which directions you are going," I said politely. He slowed his horse to a walk, and taking the compass, he asked if I thought it was right. It showed that we were going due south again. I assured him that I knew the compass was right. He said, "To hell with such weather. A man can't see a thing." Next, he cursed himself for starting out on a trip to inspect a country that was into a wilderness to him and me both. He asked me why it was we were continually going back south. I told him that the horse that was riding wanted to return to the ranch and would naturally travel in that direction when he could have his way. Then he cursed the horse. He handed me the compass and told me to strike out due north. I turned my horse north and at a lively rate, and I kept with his fine saddle horse, Fraser, which he had shipped from Chicago. He finally ordered me to stop as we approached a nice clear stream of running water. He wanted to eat lunch and rest. I readily agreed with him. I unsaddled the horses and unpacked the pack horses and hobbled them out to graze. I gathered up wood and built a fire, cooked bacon and coffee, and after we had eaten, I cleared away the dishes and sat down to talk to Mr. Hardy. We each gave each other a brief history of our lives. He told me when Mr. Pence really knew how to pick good men. He wanted to know if I could ride a bronc. I told him I did not claim to be a real bronc buster, as I was too small and too weak to handle a bad horse. He told me they had 3 bad horses on the ranch and none of the boys could handle. He wanted to find a man who could ride them. He said he would give any man $15 a month above his wages, for $5 a head a month. He told me the horses had been brought from the PX ranch in New Mexico to the C ranch in Texas and had never been broken into a saddle. Mr. Hardy said as soon as we got back to the ranch, we would gather up the horses and start the spring and summer roundup. They had bought the L7 cattle and horses from Byrd Rose and Ed Lemon the fall before, and the cattle were scattered about the Missouri River to the Wyoming and Montana line and throughout the Dakotas. He said that we would have to run 2 wagons all summer and fall. Mr. Rose and Ed Lemon were at one time partners in the old L7 outfit, each owning a 1/6 interest, the balance being owned by a financier in Chicago and one in Kansas City. Ed Lemon was born in Bountiful, Utah, 1857. He died in 1945 in Lemon, South Dakota, the town named for him. Mr. Hardy told me we would have to work 1 north and the railroad and 1 wagon south. He said that he had 3 men working the outside on other cow outfits, and he would have to keep a crew at the ranch to help bring cattle that would be shipped in. We made camp that evening near a beaver dam. I tried to tear down the dam so I could watch the beavers rebuild it. After tearing it up and where the water flowed out on the lake at a rapid speed, I went back to camp. It wasn't long before I saw 3 beavers standing in the water up to their waists. They would use their tails for paddles and never expose their bodies to view but a second at a time. It made me feel I'd done the poor little fellows a great wrong. I was really feeling sorry for them, as they worked to save the water that had made their home secure. I could hear them hard at work during the night, splashing in the water and mud in their flat tails.